You know, you caused me to worry.
What I do?
You ever had a dishwasher before?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, because I didn't shut it all the...
oh my God.
I'm not talking like that. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I call to order the meeting of the Manassas Park Governing Body for Tuesday, March 29th, 2022. First, we have approval of the agenda. As I recall, City Attorney, we have a closed session. Is that correct?
Yes, we actually have three under paragraphs 5, 7, and 8.
Okay. Are there any changes or edits to the agenda? Okay. If not, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, please join us in a moment of silence. And Councilmember Amaya, would you lead us in the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Is anyone signed up to make public comment? And have we received any emails or phone calls, anything? Public comment? No. Okay. Is there anyone who is not signed up but would still like to make public comment? Seeing no one and hearing no one, we'll move on. Information, we have a presentation on the Health District Transition Update. We have with us this evening County Executive, Mr. Elijah Johnson. Welcome, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to say Madam Chair. I have to remember I'm in another governing body tonight. I'm going to just stick this here, Larry, if you don't mind. Well, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you about this project. We've been working a lot over the last year and a half with our staff and Manassas Park staff to come up with a proposal for your consideration, along with our board and the city of Manassas as well. Again, I've got promoted. Thank you for promoting me, Mayor. I am the interim county exec. Haven't gotten the permanent job at this time. So, but thank you for that promotion. I have to tell Chair Wheeler you promoted me.
You are permanent in our hearts.
Okay. I'll remind her of that when I see it tomorrow. But we want to talk about this and give you some background, where we started, how we got here, and then our path forward, and what we would like to do to continue to work with Manassas Park as we go along this journey. Now, which if I click right, it'll go?
Yeah, I'll just use
Okay.
the arrow. Yeah, I'll just hit down.
And so, just to give you some background now, I'm going to tell you now, I cannot see that far, so I'm going, and I know what's on it, so I'm going to go through some background with you. When we started out with this a few years ago, we wanted to look at, during COVID, we were looking at what was going on with the health department. We first looked at, when we started this project, what programs are currently offered by the health district. And currently, they have approximately 96 positions. They also contract with the state VDH to provide 124 contractors, and those contracts are primarily to deal with the response to the pandemic. During the pandemic, they had to do a lot of contact tracing, as you know. They had to respond to citizens' complaints. So the state contracted a statewide vendor contract, and of which our district received 124 additional bodies to assist with the pandemic. Contract tracing was just a part of that. They had everybody to deal with vaccine management, also work in some of the sites that we stood up when the state came in and stood up the Gander Mountain site and Manassas Mall site. Also assisted with the mobile clinics that they had around the region, and then the special events that we had. Some I know we had here, and they supported some of the events that you all have. You all had their supported events in our faith-based communities as well, so we did appreciate the state providing that resource. As we move forward with that, a lot of that is going to be based on continued funding from the federal government and continued funding from the state as the new governor sets out his plans to address the pandemic. We hope we've seen the worst of it behind us, but we know we're still monitoring the situation over in Europe with the additional variant that's coming up. So the health district continues to monitor that and keeps all of us abreast of those actions. No, I'm good. The other thing we wanted to do is look at what the budget was. And with the state's budget, the state provides, there's a 55-45 shared cost for part of the budget that the state has. We're going to go more into budget in a little bit. But there's a shared cost between the jurisdictions, and each one of us has an MOU with the state currently, and that MOU lays out all the activities that we've agreed the state is going to carry out, and any additional activities that we want the health district to carry out on our behalf. And there are subtle differences. For example, we have them do environmental services because we still have a lot of well and septic properties in the county. You all are primarily on public water and sewer, so you don't need those services. So there are subtle differences in those MOUs, but if we move forward with this arrangement, first thing we looked at with those MOUs, and we would continue they're mandated to maintain all those services that the state mandates, and then we locally can ask them to continue to maintain those services, or we may change those up, depends on how we work out the agreements between each other. So we're going to be looking at that. You may recall what started this off, our board gave us a directive. They gave then County Executive Chris Martino a directive to look at what would it take to bring on the health district into the county service as a county agency. And so we started that journey, but we didn't move fast because we were dealing with the pandemic, and we thought with the pandemic, at the height of the pandemic, with the health district staff being so busy, we didn't want to engage and start the work that we knew that was going to happen, because we knew we had to engage with these it wasn't just our decision, it's your decision along with the city of Manassas as well in making that. And I think some of our elected officials have been reaching out and talking to you all about that. So they gave us that directive, and then during the budget process that the state is in now, Loudoun County also put forth a piece of legislation to move forward with establishing a local health district in Loudoun County. Our elected officials talked to you all and said, hey, and talked to the city of Manassas and said, hey, can we go together and maybe ride the current legislation, because we knew whether we did it then or now, we would have to go through that process. You all sent a letter to the governor. The governor agreed to allow you all to make an amendment to the budget. So he made that amendment, and it went back to the General Assembly, and the General Assembly approved that piece of legislation, which enabled Loudoun County, Prince William County, the cities of Manassas and Manassas Park to engage with the state health department to establish a local health district. Unlike Loudoun, unlike us, Loudoun is a standalone county. They have towns within the county, but they don't have municipal bodies like yourself, where we are jurisdictional health district, where we had to come together and say, hey, how do we look at this? But it did give you the option, if you wanted to do something else in that piece of legislation, you can do that. It provided that VDH agrees to whatever that option you may choose. So for example, the city, you could go and say, hey, county, we may not want to do this. We want to approach VDH to maybe do something on our own or do something different. And then you would negotiate with VDH, and VDH would work those details out and let you know what you could or could not do. So that piece of legislation gave everybody a lot of options. Once we did that, after we got through the fiscal year and we got past some things with COVID in July 1st, we kicked it off. We said, hey, how do we move this forward if we want to make this happen? And our first target date was July of this year to make this happen. But we're going to talk more about that because, of course, you know, with the pandemic, we had supply chain issues. We had other things that's causing delays. So we, as I told our board when we presented to them, Snowy, we're going to make July 1st date. And so we've been working with the state, and I'll talk about how we move softly through next year to have a potential start date of July 23. And the reason why we're starting on a July 1st date, everything is much cleaner with the state. And they said, they insisted that they would not want us to do a mid-year start, for example, a January 1st start. Keep everything on the July 1st date if you're going to move forward with it. So what we did was we said, hey, how do we approach this? And we set up 5 sub-teams to work on this with folks from the county, folks from both cities, representatives from the state and state agencies, representatives from the health district, to really take an in-depth look at how does the health district work. We all, we talk to them, we work with them, but the actual administrative piece, we don't get intimately involved with it before this time. And what we learned was we established the administrative team, and that team looked at all the policy documents, all of our MOUs, our contracts with the state. We reviewed Fairfax County's contract with the state because they are one of 2 independent, locally operated health districts. And we looked at Alexandria's legal documents that they had with the state. And we determined what are those legal aspects we need to think about if we move forward with this. We also set up a finance team, an IT team, a fleet and facilities team, because the health district is in 5 different locations throughout our jurisdictions. And we wanted to know what that meant. Which ones were the county buildings, what leases were privately held leases with the health district. And most importantly, we looked at the finance. What is the financial structure of the health district? What revenues do we know we're coming into the health district? And then what other costs we may have to assume if we did this? And by the way, your team participated. Mr. Palco made some subtle changes and brought on Francis. And I want to thank Francis because he brought me some treats tonight. We were talking about breakfast one day, and he brought me some sausage from Hungary. So I want to do a shout out to him for thinking about me. He must have known I didn't have dinner yet, so I'm going to enjoy that when I get back. But again, that admin team, we looked at all the administrative functions. One of the things is when we talked to Mr. Palco and Mr. Pato about how do we move forward, we decided when we initiated, hey, let's look at one health department would look like if we wanted to move forward in that direction. So that was the initial thrust of how we moved forward with this particular project. We, again, looked at all of those MOUs. We looked at, again, the legal documents. And if we move forward, there are some recommendations we're going to make that we establish an administrative board, an advisory board to the health department that gives equal representation from all parties if we move forward with this. We wanted to make sure that both cities and the county have representation, because there are going to be things that come up. We want to make sure that we are aware of those things. We're going to work together as colleagues, but we also want to know from a legislative standpoint that we have representatives from your body that you could appoint to that advisory board. But that's something we would have to talk about and establish. We haven't went in depth with that yet because we need to talk with you all, make sure that you want to first move forward. And if you do, then we can work out all the legal issues and how that would be set up in representation on that particular advisory board. One of the biggest things we wanted to also is make sure we're communicating with health district staff, because we felt, you know, this was something they didn't ask for. We were exploring it. We established a communication plan. We set up a website for them to submit questions. Ms. Nikki Brown here, who's my assistant, has been managing that process for us. We keep them updated. In fact, while I got the sources, they're going to be having a group staff meeting coming up soon, and we're going to go and participate to up them on where we are with everything. So we want to make sure they understand, because likewise, they have a lot of questions. How does this affect my tenure? Well, how does this affect my retirement? What are the benefits if I do transfer over? All those questions they have, and we wanted to be able to respond to those questions. And so we set up a communication tool where they could communicate with us throughout this process. IT and telecom, one of the things that we learned in working with the health district and working is that although the health district is here locally and they have staff here, a lot of things are handled at the state level. Contracts are handled at the state level. Leasing facilities are handled at the state level. And one of the things we found out with IT is that all of their computer equipment is under a lease contract by the state. And so it wasn't an easy just keep the equipment in place. We were going to have to swap all of that equipment out after our IT folks went and looked at that infrastructure and how it would communicate with the county infrastructure. They came back with a recommendation that we would have to replace all of that equipment and then bring in new equipment that would be compatible with our systems and security systems that we have in place. In order to address that, we know that's about $500,000 in cost to do all of that. We recommended to our board that we take that out of our ARPA funds that we have from the federal government to cover that cost, because this was a board-initiated item. We felt that we should pay for that one-time cost and not pass that cost on to other jurisdictions. So we've made that recommendation to our board, and to this day, they haven't told me no, that we won't be doing that. So we are prepared to do that if we move forward. The other thing we found out working with the IT folks is the supply chain issues. It's taken about 6 to 9 months just to get monitors into, and I see Mr. Palco shaking his head. he's experiencing the same thing. So we knew to replace monitors for 96 staff, it was going to be a tremendous undertaking. And that was one of our decisions when we met with our board to say, hey, this is one contributing factor why, although we wanted to meet your goal of starting something July 1st, we can't do it physically because we will not have the equipment in place by then. By that delay, it gives us time, if we move forward, to order all that equipment, make sure it's running, make sure it's in place before we can work with the state to make sure we have a smoother transition because they have a lot of system information that they still would have to provide to the state. A lot of reporting that we have to make sure that the state gets on a regular basis, not just pandemic stuff, the regular health district stuff that they do, the WIC programs, the tuberculosis cases that they track. All that stuff has to be reported to the state, so this will give us time to make sure those systems can run dually while we make the transition. The other thing we want to make sure we looked at, what were those additional costs that we would have to take on? What were some of the other things that we would have to do under IT? And so we went through those things, and for the most part, after we get past those equipment, there are systems that we have to migrate over and make sure we're doing the billing systems that they have in place with each insurance company, because they do bill insurance company for services. All of those things would have to be migrated over to our system to make sure those systems are in place to work. And those were all handled at the state level, not at the local level. So that brings on additional administrative costs that we would have to take on. Fleet and facilities, we looked at their fleets. They have about 8 vehicles. They are currently operating in 5 locations. A couple of those locations are county-owned property, so that makes it easy. But there are a few of those locations, 2 or 3 of those locations that are private leases that they have with owners. And so we would have to work with the state department and that's a totally different state department that handled all their leasing, to make sure that those leases can be transferred over to them. And to this date, we've been working with them, and we believe that can happen smoothly. And we've been in contact with those owners of those properties to start that process of what that would happen. They do have one lease that they would have to renew. We got to talk with the state, that ends in July. If we decide to move forward, we need to talk with them how that mechanics work, because we will not be established in a health district until next July. So we need to talk to them about that. The other properties, we're okay. We have more time on those leases, and again, the ones that are county controlled, there's not an issue. The other piece, we wanted to make sure we brought them into our motor pool system, so we're going to be setting up kiosks to make sure all of their vehicles, everything from their mobile clinics to the vehicles that they drive around in to do inspections and different things that they do, bring them over into our motor pool system. Human services one, again, we talked about a little about the staffing. We have went through all their job descriptions, making sure they can roll over into our classification system. We've had to establish some new position descriptions. We work with the health district on that. We brought an outside vendor to work with the health district to make sure we could bring people in and slot them into the right scales, because they're coming from a state scale over into a county scale. We want to make sure those positions were compatible. We looked at their benefits. We think we lined up. It's not perfect lineup, but we think we are competitive with the benefits. And we looked at retirement and how does it affect their retirement. The areas that we don't have a fix for, or we have to work out a fix for them, the retirement piece is the same Virginia retirement system that everybody else we're in here in Virginia. So the payout would be the same. If you retired at year 30 and you were going to get $1,000 a month, you still get that $1,000 a month whether they transferred over or not. The difference is the state covers an additional disability insurance. You have different types of categories of people, and I don't want to get too deep, but you have tier 1, tier 2, and then you have your hybrid folks who are in a different tier. And those folks who are in that hybrid group already have a disability insurance plan, even the county has one. For those folks, they would be starting over as new. Meaning if they had 4 years, it takes 4 years of service, 4 to 5 years of service to reach the maximum benefit in that plan. And if we transfer them over, they would lose all those years of service. So we wanted to figure out a way to make those people whole. That's the first one. And we've talked to our insurance provider, and we've come up with the way that we can take out a short-term disability insurance policy to cover those folks while they get back to the tenure that they had in the state's program. And that's about $58,000. They not only covered it for their hybrid folks, they covered it for their tier 1 and tier 2 folks who are on those more elaborate plans. And so we're going to cover those for 5 years, so to make that transition a little smoother into our system, because we do have some compatible programs on our side for the tier 1 and tier 2 employee to make that transition a little bit easier. As we started this, we wanted to if we moved forward, we wanted to make sure staff did not have major interruptions in their benefits package and their sick leave package. So as far as tenure, if you've been with the state 10 years, you're going to bring all that tenure over. You won't lose that tenure if you come over. If you are on probation, if you're in that probation year, we would not take you out of probation. You would still have to meet that year requirement of probation with the state that you already had. So we're working through all those things with the state to make sure the impact to employee is minimal. Now, the state will have to take a look at their systems because there's some things they have to do on their side of the house to, I don't want to use the word terminate, but to end employment in their system if those folks transfer. And they will have, some folks may have a choice to stay within the state if they'd like to stay within the state. So the state would have to work, and all this, again, went into saying, hey, we need to take more time to make sure we're in a place where we make sure we have those things in place. And that short time frame of, to get into July 1st was not going to work with those schedules. The other reason the state wants to, again, move to that July 1st start date is the state is a bi-monthly pay scale. Ours is a bi-weekly. And when we looked at how that is subtle differences in pay when you cross those calendar years, and if we do it at July 1st, our staff believes there won't be any impact to pay to that state employee by doing that at July 1st. So it lines up pretty nicely. Finance. We went through, we looked at all the finances, where the revenues were coming from. We talked a little briefly about the split of the local agreements, and we're all paying that now. So that whether we transferred over or didn't transfer it over, we would still be responsible for making those, because the state will continue to maintain the level of funding approved by the General Assembly for the health district. That's in the statute, and they will continue. For example, there's a proposal at the General Assembly to give an increase to all state employees of 5%. If that comes in, that would increase the health district budget. If that revenue would still come to the health district, whether they are a county agency or not. So that will maintain. We also looked at what other revenue sources came in. There are grant funding, there's local support, and then again the COVID grants that they may still come in once the merger happens. One of the other things we looked at is the state carries medical malpractice insurance. So we would have to pick up medical malpractice insurance for the health district because they work under the licensure of the health director. And we have to make sure we're covering that particular insurance. And then there's some other additional contractual services and equipment that we need to account for as we move forward. Now, one of the things that we did at the county as we were going through this, we worked with our legal department and asked them, because this is a more intense service that we've had before, although they've represented, said, what is your capacity? Can you manage this if we bring this department over and create a new department? And so we, the county, are going to take on bringing on a county, another attorney and a paralegal just for the health district if we do this. Now, we know there are legal issues here that we have to work out with you all, because there are things that you all have the health district do in certain codes that zoning orders that you have in place that we have to work with your legal team here to make sure how that's going to be processed. So those things that have to be worked out, because the county can't come over and represent in the city when those violations occur. So those are some of the legal things as we move through this process we have to work out. So, money. We worked on, if we were going to affect July 1st of this year. We haven't run the numbers on July 1st next year because we're waiting to see what happens at the state, and as things change, there are going to be subtle change. But if we were going live July 1st this year, the corporate budget for the health district is roughly a little $12.2 million. Of that, there's between state funding, grants, and other revenues, they generate about $6 million, which leaves a net that we, as three jurisdictions, would have to pick up. And as we do things now, we do it on a population basis. So 89% of that, 6.2 million would be picked up by the county, about 5.5 million. And also the city at about 8% would pick up 491,000. And then for you all, that means your share of that would be at 3.8% of the overall population. You would be at 197,000. Now, you already pay into the system. You roughly pay the health district about $76,000, if I'm not mistaken.
Around there. I can get the exact.
Yeah, about $76,000. To offset what you're already paying in this number, this would be an additional $121 roughly $1,000 that the park would have to pay in if we decided to move forward to carry this on an ongoing basis. Now, this is July this year numbers. We still would have to work out what those numbers would be for July of next year, because things will change over the year if the increase comes in from the state or we get more revenue, that may shift it up or may shift it down depending on what comes in. And staff is doing that analysis for me as much as we can right now as if we decide to move forward, so we can have those conversations with Mr. Palka and his team as well. So we want to, this is more nitty-gritty stuff. This is more what the budget is made out of, what's in it, what's driving these costs, salary and benefits. The delta here is about $600,000, a little over $600,000, as you see here. Now, when we went through this, we said, what are positions that we needed to add to make the health district a county department? And these are the positions here. We're recommending an assistant director position for the amount of staff they have there, and the span of control for the health director needs to be decreased. There are grant funds, and all their grants used to be managed at the state level. Although it came to the health district, it was managed at the state level. The county was done at the state level. They simply said, hey, you have this amount of money, we're going to send it to you. And they have some financial staff, but they don't have a grants management staff. Their HR department, all of their HR was handled at the state level. They have the vacancies, they would have to run through the state agency, they advertise the vacancy, all that work was done at the state level, and they had some work done at the local level, but the majority was done at the state level. And data analysis, that information, of course, they reported stuff, but the analysis was done at the state level. So in order to make them whole and function effectively, as staff looked at and worked with them, these are 5 positions that we're recommending that we bring on to make sure the agency runs effectively. Again, we looked at the sub-team. This is cost for bringing those folks over, and this is ongoing maintenance costs that we've built in that we would need to transfer the equipment over. We have buildings and grounds, about $44,000 additional support we would need to maintain all 5 properties, transferring leases, maintenance work that we would need to do, some minor costs in fleet and facilities that we would have to pick up. And we haven't, hopefully with the gas prices will go down. We haven't allocated here for increased gas prices this time, but hopefully by that time we won't have to worry about it. Again, leases, we're actually saving a little bit of money on the leases with the health district, with the revenue they have coming in to cover lease costs. And then financial services, the malpractice insurance, it's roughly about $300,000 of cost in that, and then the other equipment and supplies that the health district needs, roughly about $345,000. And then what leaves a delta of about $1.6 million, $1.7 million that we have to pick up that represents those increases we talked about previously. Again, those one-time costs, these are one-time costs for hardware and the motor pool kiosk, and this costs about $534,000. We have proposed to our board that we pay for it out of our ARPA allocation of funding, and we'll be having more discussions with the board that in the next coming weeks. That cost would not be passed on. Why are we doing this? What are the benefits? What do we gain? And I know that's the question that's come up a lot. Why do we do this, and what do we gain from this? And as we started this process, we talked about what do we gain in efficiency? Do we gain any cost, any savings? And when I talked to the team, I said, hey team, based on everything I know about the health district, they're underfunded. Health districts around the state have been underfunded traditionally for years, and the state hasn't funded them, and they've been supplemented. They've been supplemented by local jurisdictions for many years to get them there. So I didn't see any savings that we would get in reference to financial input or financial benefit that reduced our costs if we did this. As you can see in the cost is increasing for all of us to make this happen. The things that we do get from them that we don't always get is that connectivity with the local governments. I talked to Dr. Ansher a lot about what things she would love to do if she was a local jurisdiction. And one of the things she always looks at, she reviews our strategic plans. And she said there's a lot of opportunities within each jurisdiction's strategic plan if you wanted us to take on certain things that we don't take on because we're a state agency. We can do those things. We can make some of those things do it. For example, with the county, we're doing a heavy look at our environmental services. How are we environmental stewards from a health perspective, and from how we're taking care of not just the community or the environment, but our own community. We're looking at our death rates and how they differ from one end of the county to the other. And what are those factors from a health perspective we need to be looking at to make sure our citizens have an environment that they're living in is going to be beneficial to their life expectancy. we have a life expectancy, almost a 10-year disparity from the east and western end of the counties. So we want them to take a look at that stuff. And then what are we doing differently on the eastern end of the county? Are we bringing in the right type of businesses? Are we bringing in the right type of restaurants? What are the cause and effects of those things and some of the other decisions we make around the county? How much employment affects that? You know, having those discussions with the health district and then coming back with recommendations from a health perspective benefits us a lot. They do a lot of work with the hospitals. Right now, you probably have gotten emails about doing a community survey from the hospitals. And that making that connection with our local hospitals is going to be key as we move forward. I've talked a lot with folks at Centera about some of the things that they want to do. I know we were talking about mental health services. There are other different services. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of time that when we had the Ebola virus scare and talking to Dr. Ansher about the cases they were tracking in our jurisdiction and how they had to work within our jurisdiction to make those things happen, to make sure people were safe as folks come in. So there are a lot of, I think, connectivities around those areas in our strategic goals. Some of the other things, there may be things that we don't know that you all want to get done. And that relationship between, I'll pick the phone up and call, hey, what are you doing here? And he'll, you know, it's not about the county or the park, it's what can we do collectively together to benefit both of us. I know we did a lot of that during COVID to make sure he had events here that we took part in, we had events that they took part in, having that collaborative effort from a regional standpoint, because our citizens know no boundaries. And we learned that during COVID. And so, because when we stood up testing sites, and I said, we're going to set up a testing site for the region, because COVID doesn't know whether the person lives in Manassas City or Manassas Park or the county, how we're addressing this as a region. I think it'll give us an opportunity to collaborate even more than what we're doing now, to establish those things and then find out what are those unique things that you all want us to look at that represent your constituents, and make sure we're meeting that need at a much higher level. Some of the things that it gives us the ability, contract services. We're bureaucrats, as you all know, and it takes time. He'll tell you, getting through, but we're not the state bureaucracy. I mean, we stepped in and helped them get the contracts with Gander Mountain and with Manassas Park because of the process they had to go through with the state. They came to say, hey, how do we solve this issue in the county? We can do it quickly. We had emergency powers. Our county exec could enter into a lease real quickly. We were able to do that, where if they went through the state, it would have taken them 2 or 3 months to get that simple lease set up to open up a testing site for the community. Those kind of things we'll be able to do easily and from a contract standpoint. Of course, the staff will be on a more competitive salaries. Dr. Ansher, especially in environmental services and the medical staff, the nurses, we found out when they started the pandemic, she had 20 vacancies in nurses because of pay. And she couldn't do the programming that she needed to do without the nursing staff, but she couldn't get the funding from the state, so the board said, hey, we're going to give you some money to bring on nurses. So those kind of things, I think, will make us more agile if we did this locally. But again, we still got to sit down. We got some work to do. We want to engage with Mr. Palco and his staff and go through this, provide more information to you, whatever you need, answer your questions, so that if we decide to move forward collectively, we're doing it in a more cohesive way. And with that, I'll answer any questions you have. So the timeline is blown. Don't look at the timeline. We have here, we're going to start things. What we're thinking about for soft, if we decide to move forward, the first piece would be that we work together on our internal agreements between the 3 jurisdictions and what those agreements look like. Then we want to meet with the state and say what that overall contract with the state would look like. And hopefully we can get that work done if we decide to move forward by the fall, because we really need to start ordering equipment if we want to do this no later than November at the latest, is what my IT folks are telling me, to make sure they have stuff in place to make the transition by July 1st of next year.
Okay, so you're committing to an agreement with the city prior to dealing with the state? Is that what I
I want to talk with you all first.
Okay,
There's no
okay.
sense in talking to the state if we can't agree.
Okay, I was wondering what I was hearing.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. This was a great presentation. I think from my personal perspective, I have operational concerns and financial concerns. And top of the list on operational would be the advisory board that you mentioned, that the representation from the 3 jurisdictions would be equal and equitable. And I think that's important because that would flow into the financial concerns. Because according to the numbers, we're already teed up to pay more for what the county wants to do. So I think you'll have a lot of financial questions from the governing body this evening. So with that, thank you very much, and let's start the questioning. Who would like to go first?
Yeah, I guess I could start. I mean, hey, good evening, Mr. Johnson. My question was, how does the state determine their percentage of the revenue sharing? If it's based on population, so then wouldn't you guys go off the same metric?
This is a good question, because we're having that conversation with the state, because we're asking them to change how they approach funding it and use a more, it's not as simple as population with the state. That's what we're learning. Because one of the things we want to do as we move forward, if we do this, is have the state move to the metrics they use for social services. And if they move to that metrics, then there's more of an investment at the state level. Right now, the health department, and I know they're having conversations at the state level about how do they address, because it's not just here in the county, it's across the state, that health district was not ready for the pandemic. And they were not staffed, they were underfunded, and the state recognized that, and they're trying to do something to correct it. And one of the recommendations we gave the state is look at, so he shook his head, is look at how they fund us on the Department of Social Services, which would give a more representative funded formula for us. So it's not as easy as a population with their formula.
I see. We just go 1-1, or yeah, go ahead. No, that's fine. We could take turns. Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Moore?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and appreciate your time here this evening with us. So we will be asking our citizens to expend roughly $133,000 more than we currently spend to the state for the health care. What specifically will our citizens who are watching tonight listen and understand? What will be the takeaway? What increase in services and benefits that they're not getting today that they'll get for that $133,000 additional tax dollars that they'll be being asked to pay?
The first would be stable staffing.
Okay.
Because as we went through the pandemic, as I mentioned, it was not just nurses, the stable staffing on the support side of the house as well, to make sure and being able to add staff in a more efficient manner than they were able to do with the state. I can't tell you the amount of times that we've talked with Dr. Ansher, they want to hire a person who's qualified, and because of the state scales, they can't bring that person in. Because the state scales, say for example, state scale $30,000, that person is working in the private sector and another public sector job making $50,000, well qualified. Dr. Ansher may have the revenue to pay that and think they should get it. State says you got to start at this amount. This allows her now to come into the county system where now we can negotiate salary with that person, and they were bringing in the most qualified person. The other thing that in reference to personnel, they bring people in the low end, they train folks, and guess what? They go to Fairfax, they go to Loudoun, they go to a private sector where they can earn more money. And so they're having a fast turnaround. So that's that level of service, meaning you have qualified people or staff, long-term, get to know the community, and getting to know the community as well as you all know, as you go to your doctor or whatever, you have a relationship with them. And that service piece, I think, will be increased by having a locally ran health district. The other piece is we're going to be able to take an opportunity now, and maybe where Dr. Ansher couldn't do things or the health department couldn't do things because they were a state agency and they had to go through, get permissions and doing things. If we want to try a new program, we would have to go through a lot of requests at the state level to try that new program. Now, we have an idea, there's an issue that comes up that arises, we can more agilely address those things. We got to go through our piece, but it's not as rigorous as going through the state. So those are just some of the initial things I think benefits we'll get from this. And again, I can't wait to work with them on some of those health disparities and really take a look at what are those indicators. Because it may not just be a health issue, it may be an economic issue. It may be something else that's driving it, and their work in working with other community organizations will help us take a look at that, I believe.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments?
Oh, I have a question.
Yes, Vice Mayor Banks?
Mr. Johnson, thanks for coming and for your presentation. The slide that showed the cost the Manassas Park's going to have to pay $197,000. Will that number change, especially if the state cuts back on their funding? Or let's say your stable staffing, your nurses or whomever starts demanding more pay in order to compete with the neighboring localities in the private sector, as you pointed out. So is that 197,929, how solid is that?
I guarantee it's going to change. I'll be remiss to stand up and tell you it would change. It's definitely going to change based on market factors. It's going to change based on salary increases. It will change. If we add new services, it's going to change. So to me to set up here tonight and tell you it wouldn't change would be inappropriate. It will change. Even next year, as we look at from here to now, there are going to be salary adjustments at the state level that's going to affect that number. It's going to affect it for us as well. So there's going to be change in that. I don't know how much, whether it's going to go up or down. It's just going to be different factors that'll play into that.
Okay, and thank you for your honesty on that. My final question is to follow up Councilmember Moore's question about benefits that our citizens are listening right now. I didn't hear like a satellite office or an office that Manassas Park would have here. I mean, would we get any benefit in terms of just having a satellite office here for our residents?
Well, that's something definitely we can. That's why I say there's things that we may not know that you want. If that's a satellite office to bring things in, that's a part of why we need to sit down and say, hey, what is it that you want that we're not getting now? And what would the cost of bringing that on be?
Okay.
So those are things we definitely could talk about. Not opposed to that at all.
So everything that would be added on would increase the cost?
Depends.
Okay.
It depends on whether we can take existing staff to do it. It depends on, because obviously, you get a satellite office, you got to pay for lease space, unless it's in a current facility that you already own where there's no cost there. If it's not in a current facility, then you got lease cost that comes along with that. You got utility costs, you got vacuuming costs, you got cleaning costs. All those things have to be factored in. And if it's in a facility that you already own, you get ready to build a nice new facility over here. If it has space in your facility to house staff, then the cost will be minimal. It's just the cost of having staff there and whatever they need.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Question?
I have a good I was about to say good morning, good evening. Thank you for coming tonight. I have a quick question. The roughly 3.2% of the proposed budget breakdown, is that based on the number of Manassas Park residents that use the current service or our general population number?
General population.
Okay. Do we know how many of our residents actually use the service?
I don't know that number now, but we can check with the health district.
I'd be most grateful if you did. Thank you.
No questions? Yes, go ahead.
If Manassas Park was not to go forward with this, what would your budget decrease? I'm sure it wouldn't be the full 197,000.
Would it decrease?
If you didn't have to service Manassas Park,
We would pick up all those costs.
so it would stay the same. Your budget would stay exactly
The
the
budget would
same.
stay the same.
Okay.
Because when I say that, the staffing needed to cover the cost, whether we have all three jurisdictions or one jurisdiction is going to remain the same.
The staffing would remain the same. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Javed, did you have a follow-up?
No, I think Banks answered that question about
Okay.
the increase.
Okay.
That's what, it makes sense. I mean, it's going to go up or down, like Johnson was saying. Back to the staffing point, currently, right now, the department services all three jurisdictions with the current staff. So bringing on more additional staffing to do the same services, and then we have to eat that cost? Is that what my understanding is?
The staffing that we're suggesting here is staffing that they don't currently have on staff to
Right.
handle that paperwork, to handle the stuff that we're talking about here. That work is being handled at the state level.
Oh, that's the state level.
Yeah, it's at the state level. It's not at the local level.
Okay.
If it was handled locally,
Yeah.
believe me, we wouldn't be suggesting bringing on
Right.
additional staff.
Yes.
Just another quick timing question, sir. I know you want to go a soft opening July 1st. So when would this body have to make a decision whether to participate in the county's efforts or to do some other things?
We would need to start engage with your staff here and hopefully make a decision by the summer because of the timing of ordering things in the fall and giving us time to also work with the state to initiate that. I think by July, August at the latest, we would need to have a final decision.
Okay, by July or August, okay. Thank you.
Follow-up?
Yeah, that's
Go ahead.
What was the whole purpose? I know you started on it, but I didn't really actually hear a concrete of why this has been being initiated to, go
To start this
separate
process
ways, from the state.
From the state.
Like, so what happened at the county level that made that decision?
At the county level was,
Yeah.
we're in the pandemic, and as many people, we were looking for our state to move more quickly to respond to the local needs, and the state, I'm not gonna blame the state, they were caught like everybody else, and they were looking to, they didn't start as fast as we would hope they had started. The other piece was that some of our board members, in talking with them, they are looking to do different things. They are looking at, as they have now 2 years on sitting on the seat,
Yeah.
they're learning different things that their constituents need from a health perspective. And so they want to see how they can address those needs here locally. And one of the things that I hear from them, as we talked about, is that disparity on life expectancy between magistrate districts. And they want to take a look at that and what impacts we can do from a health perspective, from a health department that we can bring. What type of programming we can bring to those citizens that they may not be getting now under the current arrangement with the state.
So you're saying that their infrastructure they have in place, you can replicate
Yes, we can replicate.
at the county
we can
level,
build on.
and you can build on it.
Hey, I've got
In fact, we
one.
know we can replicate. And we believe with citizens to have the capacity
Right.
to increase if we need to.
Right. And I have no doubt. Yeah. That's it.
Follow-up? Okay.
Madam Mayor, I got one
I-
more question.
I have concerns about long-term costs, how we can in some way control the long-term costs for our city, but I think that relates partly back to the operational aspect of it. We're already being asked to pay more than what we're paying right now. And to Councilmember Moore's point, what tangible expectation can our residents have for that? Because that's actually the equivalent of more than a point on the tax rate, isn't it? What would that
The
be?
130, it's, this year, it's probably going to be around 60% of 1 cent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So,
I have one more
Yes.
question. I'm going to bring it to first principles. Does Manassas Park need to join a health district?
Yes, by state mandate. The state has to cover each magistrate district with health services. There's certain state requirements that they must carry out from a health perspective. For example, tuberculosis testing. They also do screening they also do vaccinations and screening for your school-age kids. So there are certain mandated state responsibilities that the state has, so they have to provide services. Now, and you only have 2 jurisdictions currently that have a locally ran health department. That's Alexandria and Fairfax. Everybody else is underneath VDH and ran through a health district.
So we could do the same as Alexandria then?
That's what we're attempting to do now.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
any final comments or questions? Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here this evening.
Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to come back at any time.
Yeah, and it's a pleasure to see you again
Yes, always.
in person.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions that they haven't thought of now, please email them, and we'll forward them on to Mr. Johnson.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to no recognition, no presentation, no consent agenda, restaurant voucher program.
Just as an update, and Mark, if you want to come up as well, we went back as a staff to revisit the updated change, not linking it to vaccinations, and you can see in the memo what we came back with moving it to a $25 voucher, opening up to all residents, and we'd actually start issuing the vouchers the week of the event as well, so people could come to City Hall to pick it up if it's not convenient, if they don't want to wait in line on a Saturday when we do the event. Those are kind of the major changes we put, just to make it a lot more simple for our residents. We still want to do the 3 events at each shopping center to kind of promote the shopping centers as well, and to hand out the vouchers on that day. We'll do our best during the week of leading up to it as residents come in to kind of put their information down, so we avoid duplicate voucher provisions during the week. However, during the day of the event, our goal is to give out as many vouchers, just prove prove you're a resident of Manassas Park, and we'll give you a voucher that day. And so we don't want to become too bureaucratic on the day of, because the goal is just to get the money out to our residents and have them go enjoy the service. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Lamar.
Actually, the only update that we've had since we spoke earlier is that we were able to go ahead and, excuse me, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council guests. The other thing that we were able to update is securing the second location, the Manassas Park Plaza, has been secured. The gym that is located there, they have a lot on the side, and I spoke with the gym owner today. He did advise that they have an agreement with the landlord where they are able to go ahead and block that off and do events. So he said he would be more than happy for us to go ahead and have that event in that particular location. Preston's also offered up some of their spots, so we actually have 2 locations that we can actually set up in that particular spot. So we are trending in the right way right now, and we're just really working to get, like I said, the confirmation of the restaurants. Now that we have an agreement, we're also taking W-9s to all the businesses as well. So again, we're just reconfirming the restaurant's interest, and like I said, we've also confirmed the 2 locations.
Will it be 1 voucher per person who?
That's the
comes?
goal
Okay.
is yeah, one voucher per person, and it'll be easier to regulate that during the week of the build-up. During the event, again, we don't want long lines, so we really just want to see that you're a resident, and we'll hand it out. And then I believe we'd also be handing, if you missed all last week and the day of the event, the following Monday after the event, we'd also be available to hand out the last of the vouchers of the first round for residents who may have missed the week prior.
Okay.
Again, first come, first served. So if
Yeah.
we do have more.
Yep, that's right. If we run out, then we won't do the Monday.
Councilmember Mensing?
Why the increase to 25?
Because remember, when we were linking it to vaccinations, we had $15 per. That was just kind of incentive to boost. But now that we're not doing the incentives, it just makes it easier to have a dollar amount that's strong enough to promote interest.
Okay.
Yes, Councilman.
Thank you for the revision. Will the events have any thing about vaccination? Will it have any programming information about getting their vaccination at the time?
We're
That will
working
continue?
with Giant to have still a tent there.
You're still going to have to do the
Just
tent.
like we did for
Good.
the Latino Festival, to just have a presence there. If people want to get vaccinated, then they
That's
can
good.
do so at the event.
The other question, I know this is just restaurants, so that wouldn't apply to places like 7-Eleven or gas stations? That's too bad.
They
Gas
didn't.
is so expensive.
They didn't see the.
No, why not? Why not? We're giving free food. No, but I understand.
They
That's
didn't see
fine.
the negative impact during the pandemic, so we try to limit it to those businesses that saw that negative
Sure,
impact.
makes
Yeah.
sense. Thanks. Thanks, Laura.
It's
Thank you.
defendable,
It's difficult.
yes. Comments or questions?
I have a question. So, good evening. My question is, what are you thinking about what are you envisioning for these events? I know before everything was around the vaccinations, but give me some insight, if you would, please, into what that event would look like.
So I, being, having come in October, the only first large event I saw was the Latino Festival. But I
Can you speak a little louder, please?
Yes, absolutely. So coming in October, the first event that I attended was the Latino Festival, and I did not have an opportunity to really see the logistics behind it. So what I'm envisioning is essentially what the city has done previously for their National Night Out. I'm really hoping to get a bounce house, maybe some clown, face painting, balloon animals, simple carnival snack fare, candy apples, popcorn, pretzels, just something to, get some balloons up, really just make it something where when you drive by, it's like, oh, what is that? And, you want to stop for a quick moment.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
That sounds fun.
Especially the bounce house.
And
Yeah,
clowns.
I'll do that.
That's
Follow-up?
$25.
Yes.
I thought we talked about the city employees or city ID as well would be accepted, or are we just doing residents?
Employee ID?
Yeah.
This is intended for residents.
Yeah.
If you would want to expand it to employees, that's your discretion.
That's
I'm
what
not
I
sure the
was-
legality of us using ARPA money for our employees for that.
Well, it's still, as long as they're still being used at the local restaurants.
Okay, then it should be
The
a problem.
purpose was, because we're not using it to vaccinated anymore. We're just trying to help local restaurants.
Okay. Yeah, so that'd be an option, I guess. Yeah. Oh, okay.
I would think it would be a good thing to expand it to the staff.
Yeah, any like city ID, everybody, even the schools, they have those city IDs. So anybody that works in Manassas Park, lives in Manassas Park can participate.
Ah.
I don't know, it's up to you guys. But
Yeah.
One per person, right?
yeah.
So if I get one at the event and then come on Monday, would be able to get one?
The intent is that it is one per person. The only time that we would be looking to track any information is during the week so that we can try to make certain that people aren't double dipping.
Okay.
But essentially what's going to happen on the weekend, so yes, you could come in on Monday, get a voucher, and then come in on Saturday and get another one. It is possible. But of course, when you come get your voucher, I will tell you, thank you so much for coming in today. We really appreciate you, taking this, go have fun, tell your friends because you're going fast. And, I'm not going to imply that, you can come back or anything. And if you ask me if you can come back, I'm going to say I'd rather you didn't.
So we're not going to let people double dip.
We're going to try to.
Or try
limit
not
it as
to,
much as
okay.
possible. Yes,
Because
ma'am.
I could envision them scalping them. No, seriously, taking a $25 coupon, get $10 for it. and-
There's a lot of, there's a lot of things we can't control
Yeah,
with this, but the goal is, again, just to help out our restaurants as much as possible, and hopefully our people will behave themselves and follow the spirit of the program as much as they can. Yeah.
You have to watch the forum.
any last minute questions or comments? No? Whenever you decide what to put out for the public to advertise, if you could share that with all of us so that we could get it out on our personal contact lists. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, so staff recommended motion is that the governing body authorize the city manager to implement the 2022 Manassas Park Voucher Program as presented and subject to final review by city attorney.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, 8B, letter of support for the Capital Area Food Bank. We have been asked to approve a letter of support for the Capital Area Food Bank. They are requesting federal funds. Any comments on this? It's pretty straightforward. Everybody's had a chance to look it over. Okay. Staff recommended motion is that the governing body approve and authorize the mayor to sign a letter of support on its behalf requesting congressionally directed spending for FY 2023 to help fund the Capital Area Food Bank's reconstruction of its facility in Lorton, Virginia, as presented.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have Health District Contract for FY '22.
Yeah, so you can see on the memo that our current year spending or charge amount for the state is $43,000. That will be growing as the state increases the share of the city. So it's going to grow about $20,000 over the next 2 years. The only edit we made to this agreement was to change, they always reference it as city council. We made the amendment so that they would address it as the governing body, and thank the dean who spoke to the attorney general's office to be able to make that change. So that's the only real change that we had.
Okay. This is something we do, for the folks at home, we do this every year. Okay. Any comments or questions? No? Pretty straightforward. Okay. Staff recommended motion is that the governing body approve and authorize the city manager to sign an attached agreement with the Virginia Department of Health as presented and subject to final city attorney review.
Moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you. And next, we have the Manassas Park City Schools FY23 budget presentation. We have Dr. Saunders with us this evening. We have Mr. Lyon. We have our school board chair, Ms. Kirkland, and we have vice chair, Mr. Alexander. Welcome, everybody.
It's on the screen, so you can just scroll down.
All righty.
I think you just scroll.
Arrows.
Yeah, you can either use the arrow to go down,
And
or you can scroll down. Scroll down, should work there.
Madam Mayor, everybody members, this evening and to present the school board's adopted fiscal year 2013 budget to you. Our five-member school board was thrilled with the level of collaboration that we've been able to have with you for this budget cycle. We're deeply grateful.
Can you speak a little louder?
Okay. I can't do a lot. No, we are deeply grateful to have the level of collaboration both with the city staff and school staff, as well as the two governing bodies, the school board and then the city council. So thank you for that. The strategic plan, which we approve every year, really informs our work, everything we do, but certainly the budget. Our goals are to prepare students to be life-ready, to cultivate and grow committed professionals who are working in our school division and serving our students, and to provide effective and efficient support for safety and success of all students. And with that, I will turn it to Dr. Saunders. I have no problem talking loud. I was middle school principal for years, so I'm all good with that. We'll figure out where to put this for now. So good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the governing body. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Thank you, Chair Kirkland and Vice Chair Alexander for being here as well for my first official budget presentation with the city. So I just, I have to echo Ms. Kirkland's conversation around the collaboration with our budget this year. I feel very blessed to have been welcomed by everyone in our community from the city government. City Manager Palco and I have had lots of good conversations, and as well as the additional city staff that's here. I've just been really welcomed, and we've been very blessed to have that as part of it. So I'm going to start off tonight by just talking a little bit about my focus for this school year. You may have heard this before. I think when I was here earlier in the year I shared some of this information. But this school year continues to be one like no other. And we've had several focus areas. I really came in trying to understand what it is that we needed to do in our schools. First and foremost, at the beginning of the year, it was all about opening school, teaching and learning, and really understanding and assessing, addressing the unfinished learning from the pandemic. I've shared with a lot of people, I think we thought we were going to be in a different place. I think we thought everything was going to start and go just perfectly. And then we had ebbs and flows and changes and challenges throughout the school year. And so our staff, our students, our community, our family has just been amazing through those changes and challenges. I feel like we're in a bit of we've hit some road, we're hitting a pace, we're hitting some things now, and so I'm excited for what's to come. But we still have quite a bit of work to do around the assessing and addressing the unfinished learning. You know, our students came to us different after 18 months of dealing with this, and so we continue to figure out ways in which we can support them both socially, emotionally, academically, as well as support our staff, the hard work that they're doing, and try to manage that each day. I've spent a lot of time listening, learning, and building relationships, not only with my own school staff, but with the governing body, with our school board, with our community members, with our business partners, and trying to understand the greater city as a whole and understand how we support that and our mission within that. Talked a lot about compensation structure, and you're going to see that reflected here in in our budget as really the primary focus that good quality teachers and staff members in front of our students make the best difference. That's what gets to that, addressing those gaps in unfinished learning. And our organizational structure. We are just now kind of starting in that process of looking at where do we find the supports, the resources, and become more efficient in supporting our employees and our students throughout the school year. So for this budget, I'm proud to say that we really had 4 priorities and different lenses that we applied as you make hard decisions around budgets, and you make You talk to people and you understand what are the things that come to the forefront as your priorities. First and foremost is student achievement. In everything that we do, it's why we exist. It is what we do best. It is what we love and what we enjoy and where our passion is. And we have to make sure that we provide our students with the best achievement opportunities as possible, really focusing on keeping class size at an appropriate way, making sure that our students have opportunities to continue to grow and learn. Employee recruitment and retention was the second focus. I often say, I've said it many times, that the best way to get at student achievement is highly qualified, highly compensated teachers in front of them. Teachers make the most difference every single day in what our students are able to do, and so we have to really think about that, and again, you'll see that as a budget priority tonight. Our capital improvement plan, we'll talk a little bit about that, and having our facilities and being able to serve our students and our staff members in the most effective ways. And then most importantly, I think for me, was thinking about sustainability and future planning. And how do we create a budget that lets the governing body know and lets our community know what we look like in the future, and how do we continue to sustain our highly qualified, compensated staff and the resources and the support. So really trying to look at that and planning forward so that we're not surprised by the things that are coming in front of us. This is a slide that is familiar for you. I've presented some information about a phased compensation plan. We know that we have to look at our compensation structures within the school division, and we also know we can't do that all at one time. It's a heavy lift. It's a lot of work for our staff, and it has a budget impact along the way. There were some compensation studies that were done prior to me taking this position in July, and so we used some of that information to help inform the information that's here. But we really took a look at a 4-phase plan. Really, phase 1 happening in this particular proposed budget, the FY23, or the school board adopted budget for the FY23, where we simply looked at teacher salaries. The next phase, really looking at support staff, those remaining on the unified scale, those support staff members, and then taking a look at our processes, procedures, rewriting job descriptions, understanding that everything was aligned. We have some gaps in those areas, and we need to address those in the coming years. And then phase 3, taking a look at our stipends, our extra pay for extra duties, things that teachers do in coaching and supporting our schools in many other ways, as well as our administrative scale, and then being fully involved in phase 4 and trying to touch on each of those groups in a very systemic way. Last Monday I presented a project plan for how, with some high-level milestones and some tasks that really follow, that sort of build out this plan a little bit further. I presented that to our board. So our budget development process was really a 5-phase process. It was very comprehensive, it was collaborative, and we really started first at the place where things happen. We started at the school levels with our staffs and our principals and our assistant principals, really determining what were their needs, what kinds of things would they like to have in their building to address our students, to address the student achievement. That moved to a division level team who took a look at that, and this is where those budget priorities start to come into play. So they sort of use that lens, those budget priorities, to define, well, okay, what things are we going to move forward? What things are requirements within our standards of quality that we need to fund and we need to provide for our students? And what things are wants and things that we would like to have in our schools, but we know that there are other priorities that need to be addressed. So the division level team then provided me with a proposed budget, and as the superintendent, then I again did another phase of looking at it through those 4 lenses and took a look at where we ended up, which was the superintendent's proposed budget to the board. And then the board spent some time looking at those items and has adopted a proposed budget, and here we are this evening in front of the governing body. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lyon, our Executive Director of No, Executive Director of Finance. Guarantee every different title. I know, right?
Get promoted.
So to share with you some of the data around the budget and provide some of the specifics, and then we'll close with Ms. Kirkland again as well. So thank you again. And everybody else's, apparently.
Well, good evening, Madam Mayor, Rochelle, fellow council members. Thank you for allowing me here tonight to present the budget. As I pick up, and thank you, Dr. Saunders, as I pick up where Dr. Saunders left off, you know, a lot of the student achievement, everything's driven by enrollment. You know, that's why we're here for the kids. And so we look at enrollment, we look at the past years, those are actuals, and then we look forward into the future years. Right now, our enrollment has been declining slightly each year for the past few years. And looking forward, I still see that trend possibly still continuing. And then you can see there the subgroups for economically disadvantaged, English learners, and special students with disabilities. And when you look at this graph, you can see the actual numbers below it in the table. And on the left and right, this is a kind of a compound chart. On the left, you'll see hard numbers. Those are the actual numbers of enrollment of students as of September 30th. And then on the right-hand axis, vertical axis, is the percentage of student population by the reporting groups. Here, we look at average daily membership, and that's what the ADM stands for. And that's the number that the state looks at twice a year to determine our basic aid and our revenue streams from the state level. As you see, our average daily membership has, you know, it's correlated to enrollment, but it's not enrollment. Average daily membership is the total number of days a student is enrolled with us. And they take a picture at the whole year, and they divide that by the total days in session with that formula. And they snapshot that on September 30th, and then again on March 30th. And those are the dates, the data snapshots that drive that. We use that information. The state uses that information to determine our funding from their levels. As a state code, we're required to share what our per pupil expenditures are. So as you look across that chart, you see the past years are actuals, and then 2022 and 2023 are projected per pupil expenditures. You'll see the 22 and 21 and 22 years definitely jump up from previous years, and 23 is much higher on the state level too. I built this on our projected revenue that was shared from the state back in December. Now, I'm sure you all know that the General Assembly has several bills that haven't been reconciled yet. That will change that number in 2023 once those bills are finalized. As you heard Dr. Saunders say, one of the biggest priorities for this budget bill was to develop a pay scale for teachers, more traditional pay scale for teachers that was equitable across all years of service and in support of recruitment and retention. So we took a look at we started building this back in the fall, and we took a look at our neighboring direct competing neighbors, county and Manassas City. Took a look at their published pay scales for 21, 22, and added 5% to their base salaries. And that became our starting point for ours. We developed this traditional pay scale to ensure the equity and retention. When teachers looked at this, we've communicated it because they're going from a unified scale. Right now, the system is on one scale called a unified scale, and it's much different. It has loyalty bonuses, has degree bonuses. And the traditional scale, to message this so people can understand and connect some dots, the loyalty bonus in the traditional scale really is moving from one step to the next, because that's the loyalty of staying in the system. The degree bonus, when you look at the traditional scale, are the columns, the lanes across, the vertical lanes across the scale. So those are your degree bonuses. And as you look at those degree bonuses, the amounts for a bachelor's plus 15 grad credits is $1,378 on top of the bachelor base salary. Master's is an additional $6,000. A master's plus 15 hours is $8,000, and a doctorate is $10,000. And I provided a snapshot there of the 200-day scale, which is the teacher's contract is 200 days. And as you can see, the educational levels are across the top. The steps are down the left. Now, the steps down the left are not necessarily directly representative of the years. The very first step in that scale represents teachers with 2 or less years of experience. So step 2 would be a teacher who has actually 3 years of experience. And then, so you could take a teacher's completed years of experience at the beginning of the year, subtract 1, and that will be the step they would be assigned. And then you'd find their educational column across the table of member salary. So right now, the average raise was about 8%. And we broke it out here for simplicity reasons. Along the left is just some groupings. Teachers with 0 years experience, 5, 10, 15 years experience, and so forth. And how those salaries look on our proposed scale and how they compare to the city and the county. Now, when I've developed this, the city and the county have not published any pay scales for 22-23 yet. Again, I took their 21-22 pay scales and added 5%. So as you see, our closest competitor, we're dead even. One thing when we developed the scale, we wanted to retain that competitive edge that we have in the unified scale right now for those new teachers to the career of teaching, and we've done that, I believe. So we've stayed competitive now, not only at the beginning of the scale, but down throughout the scale. We're still slightly, as you look through the 15-year, 20-year, 25-year, we start to drop behind Manassas City slightly, but it's not much. We're still competitive. And there are other things we offer besides money that really draw people here at Manassas Park. And so it is a great place to live. Now, all the other employees who are not teachers will remain on the unified pay scale next year. They will receive a 5% increase in this proposed budget, a 5% increase to their hourly rate, their annual salary, with exception to executive directors. They would receive 3%. And so on the table below, I just showed some positions there on what they would make right now on the base salary, and then what that base salary would look like in FY23. So just to summarize real quick, FY23 budget, the teacher pay scale is competitive and supports longevity with our employees. The remaining personnel on the unified scale would receive 5%, again with the exceptions to the executive directors. And these adjustments would result in a $2.3 million increase in salary costs and about a $980,000 increase in benefits. Looking at our staffing, FY22 we had about 511 FTEs. In this budget we're proposing the same number of FTEs, 511. Now, we've done this and been able to maintain class size in K3 at 22-1, grade 4, 24-1, grade 5, 23-1, and the middle and high school remain unchanged. Now, we don't break it out, 24-1 and 3-1 at the middle school and high school because those classes are all very different. But we're not reducing any FTEs at those levels, so it will remain the same. Other staffing adjustments, we will be moving high school counselor contracts to 11 months, parent liaisons to 11 months, the high school registrar to 12 months. And this is where the next bullet, we really took a lot of time looking at our enrollment, looking at our SOQs, and looking at our open positions that we have not been able to fill all year. We took a look at those, and the budget requests from our budget, the schools, the principals, and the departments. And we identified 8 vacant FTEs that we could repurpose to meet some of these new needs that were identified. So, of these 8 repurposed FTEs, 2 would be for 2 additional ESOL teachers at Cougar Elementary, and that's to meet the SOQ requirement. 1 ESOL teacher at Manassas Park Elementary, again, to meet the SOQ requirement. 2 testing and intervention specialists to support the state assessment program, which has expanded greatly. Now we have to test grade 3 through 8 3 times a year, starting next year. It used to be just the spring, but they've expanded it. And that's a heavy lift. And it starts at grade 3 through the high school. 1 additional PE teacher at Manassas Park Elementary, again, for SOQ, to support the SOQ minutes for that level. An on-time graduation and Cougars Connect coordinator. This position, again, would support the high school meeting the accreditation requirements for reducing the dropout rate and increasing the graduation rate. And then taking the position that we have filled for the supervisor of special ed services and repurposing that to include also the transition services, which was a requirement that came out of a audit of the special ed department last year. So looking at our revenue source, 65% of our revenue comes from the state, 24% comes from the governing body, and 10% from the federal, and 1% from local. Local is, refunds, local grants, just offshoots that don't fit anywhere. Looking at our funds, we have 5 funds. We have, our largest fund is the general fund, and that is where the transfer from the Manassas Park governing body, that's the fund that transfer sits in and supports. That covers 88% of our expenditures. When we look at expenditures by function, you'll see construction is around 72%, the largest chunk of it, obviously, and then the others break out across the scale. When we look at expenditures by object, salaries are around 58%, and benefits around 21%, so 79, so nearly 80% of our budget is for personnel. Now, the next few slides, I will break down our 5 funds in revenue and expenditure. Again, general fund, that's our largest fund, it's 88% of our expenditures. This is the fund that the city transfer supports. So when we look at our revenues across the board here, you see FY20, FY21 with the A next to it, that's the actual final calculations for those budget years. FY22B is the budgeted amount, we're still in that budget, so those are the amounts that are on the approved budget. And FY23, obviously, are the amounts I'm proposing tonight. So when we look at this, you'll see at the top, our revenue from the city for FY23, our budget amount is $13 million. That is the exact amount that was in your approved budget from last year as your projected amounts to support the school system. So we are not asking for any additional funds. We are very happy with it.
And we appreciate that. Thank you for making that work. Thank you. Thank you.
Make a good team. Commonwealth. Now you'll see a huge jump, 4.4 million in Commonwealth, and the projected revenue in December that I received from the former governor's budget amendment. It included a $4.4 million increase across several different funds, mostly in our lottery funds and our incentive funds. Just to remind you again, the General Assembly has many bills out there. They haven't reconciled it, so that number may change, and I can pretty much guarantee I'll be back probably 4 to 6 weeks with an amendment to change that. But that's how it would have budgeted, which was great timing for us to do this new scale with that increase in revenue. So with our revenue FY23, we're looking about almost 47.8 million in revenue. And then if we go down in expenditures, you'll see salaries and benefits and down the line there. You'll notice some pretty big increases in contract salaries there. Again, we have a lot of things going on. The special education services department, it was hard to fill any position this year, especially for the specialty areas. OT, OT we have a part-time, but PT and other special services that students with IEPs may need. And next year, it will even be more difficult. So we plan to increase those contractual costs for those services to the student. That's most of that. Materials and supplies, you'll see a pretty good jump there too. Again, those are textbooks. They include a lot of technology improvements to our infrastructure. Mr. McCormick is replacing almost, I believe, all the switches in our entire network, and some other major upgrades, and then computers for students. And as we go down there, we see a total expenditures of $47,280,000. Now, your eyes are seeing correctly, it's less than the revenue. And so we have an unobligated amount right now of $514,000 in this proposed budget. I'm going to table that amount for a moment. We'll come back to it at the end of the presentation, as we have some slides that we'd like to talk about on the line item for that amount later on. Another fund is the federal fund. This is our Title I, Title II, Title III, Title VI-B, CTE Perkins, and all of our ESSER or ARP funds drop into this budget here. So as you see, Right now, FY '23, we're anticipating about 3 million. Last year was 4 million, so we're still getting those monies in, and that money is very fluid because we plan to spend it this year, a portion of it, but if we don't spend a portion of it, then we'll have to amend this budget and transfer those costs into the next year. So that number will change eventually down the road. The school nutrition fund, the self-supporting fund, you'll see the biggest difference here is in the local revenue there, and that's because the meals became free. We didn't charge for lunches anymore. Now there's chatter that may change again, so that may come back later on down the road, but for right now, that's how it is. Forgot to mention one thing. On one thing here, you'll see contract services increased to 24,000, more than the previous year. And so one thing, we got a memo from the state saying any capital improvement projects, try to split out the actual capital improvement tangibles that are being added versus the labor costs, the human costs. And so that's why that contract service is up a little bit more than 24,000 than the previous year, because I wanted to make sure I did that. Capital improvement plan, this is the one you've seen before. One thing you'll see in FY '23, just to remind you, in the budget amendment I did in January, I had moved the middle school air handlers up to this current year because we had that other grant come in, the matching grant. Right now, we're working on it. We have the RFP in the street. We may bring that back and ask for a carryover from that into next year's budget if we can't get it in by June 30th, which is probably likely going to happen. But we'll bring that back and revisit that at the time. But my goal is to have money from this budget left over for that. And that's capital improvement fund. Right now, up in the revenue, you'll see there on the city line, you'll see a dash. Right now, in this proposed budget, I'm not anticipating a need for city revenue for the capital projects. But you'll see in the Commonwealth line, there's 763,000. Again, back in December, in our projected revenue from the state, it included $2.3 million for capital projects. So that would support everything for us for the next 2 or 3 years. Now, the General Assembly, that's one of the bills that's in play. They haven't landed on where that money would be. The House of Delegates actually took the money back and want to make it a competitive grant. Want to hear a competitive grant situation. And the state Senate wants to put it back where it originally was in December, which would be right there. So that may come back and change once those bills are reconciled. And the trust, again, this is a small fund we use for our retirees that want to participate in our insurance program. We get a subsidy from the state, and then the difference the retiree makes up that difference. So looking at all the funds, total all funds together, we're looking at about $54.4 million of revenue, and about 53.8. I should have moving this one down. Read this now. 53.8, which leaves us a positive difference of 588,000. Now, remember us in the general fund is 514, so that difference is in the other funds that wouldn't be part of the general fund. One thing I'd like to bring to your attention is the 5-year forecast. As Dr. Saunders put in her budget priorities, is whatever we propose, we want to make it sustainable. We want to look down the road. And so I built a 5-year forecast with these assumptions. This 5-year forecast, from 1 year to the next, every employee on the unified scales receives a 2% increase on their salary. Teachers receive 1 step each year. And in FY25 and FY27, there's a 2% increase applied to the actual teacher scale for a cost of living adjustment to those salaries, in addition to their step. The non-personnel costs remain flat across all the years. The state funding in FY23 and 24 reflect the actual projections I received back in December from the state. FY25 and FY26 are projections based on a 2% increase from the current FY23-24 biennium budget amounts. Now, because of the economic project you have going on, we anticipate that really having a positive impact in growth on the area. So in FY '27, we're anticipating a local composite index change from the state, which would require more funds locally for the school system and less state revenue received. So when we look at FY '27, I decreased the projected state amount by 1.7% due to that possible LCI change down the road. On the federal funding, I assume a 2% increase. So as you look across this 5-year projection, every lane from left to right is a fund. So you have the federal fund at the top, and the general fund is the second lane below that. And the general fund is where the money from the governing body lands. So when we look across that in FY '23, you see that 514,000 positive difference right now. But as we look out, you'll see 24, 25, 26, 27, we start to have a negative difference. And that's the sustainability we want to start preparing for. And we have the board has a proposal here that Madam Chair Kirkland will be discussing to address that. And then go down through the services, the capital improvement projects. Again, when you look at that capital improvement project lane, you'll see FY '23 and FY '24. Again, that was based on the December projections of 2.3 million. So I do not project any city transfer for capital work on those 2 years. But when you look at 25, 26, and 27, I start to bring the city back into the revenue projection there. Okay. With that, I will yield to Madam Chair. Kirkland.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Okay, so we talked about the variance in the upcoming years and the potential changes in the LCI, and we would like to start planning for that now. And the way we've identified to do that is by establishing a state stabilization reserve line item within the governing body's budget. The purpose is to provide some sustainability for those operational costs, especially as we implement the new pay scales. So really looking at the salaries. Begin to prepare for those changes in the fiscal year 27. We want to be very specific. It is not intended to fund the capital improvement plan. With this, we would like some parameters set around it. That unobligated revenue from the original city transfer in an approved budget at the beginning is deposited into the line item. Any unexpended revenue from the city transfer after closing out a fiscal year budget is in the line item. There needs to be limits though. The stabilization line item would be capped at 5% of the average total general fund expenditures over the last 5 consecutive years. Once we reach that cap, all unobligated or unexpended funds would be returned to the governing body. Prior to utilizing any funds from that line item, the school system, MPCS, will first analyze its budget for opportunities to reprioritize current budgeted operational funds to balance the budget. If all attempts to balance the budget for operational needs are not successful, then we would request funds from the state stabilization line item to balance the budget. But funding for capital improvement expenses would continue to be requested through the governing body separately and are not intended, saying this again, not intended to be funded by the state stabilization line item. Now, Mr. Lyons already discussed the potential scenarios that could impact the fiscal year 23 proposed budget. Some of those, again, going to the bills in Richmond and the difference between the House and the Senate. And then mandated requirements coming up, potentially needing 1 or 2 reading specialists, adding an additional 2 SROs, depending on what comes out of Richmond, as well as the need to, we might need to request additional revenue from the governing body for those CIP projects if, again, out of Richmond, the alignment of those bills is not favorable. And very possibly, we might have unobligated revenue, we might not have unobligated revenue after balancing this budget with all of these changes listed. That said, there are once Governor Youngkin and the General Assembly reach an agreement on these bills and produce the state budget, we'll likely be back before you with amendments. But we do anticipate at least one when the budget's finalized. Now, our next steps, we run out of them. We have no more steps. Tonight was the last night of our process in terms of bringing the budget to you. I do want to mention that instead of having our own budget book as we had in previous years, we are actually working to include our budget and documents in the city's overall budget book as another step in the approved collaboration between the two bodies.
Super.
That signals the end of our presentation. I would like to thank the entire school staff for all the work that they put into this. The school board for their support, as well as the support of city staff and you all. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We very much appreciate everything. We appreciate all the questions that you've answered for the governing body. Appreciate that you've listened to all of our comments. And we want to thank you so much for the collaborative working relationship that the division is engaging with the entire city. Much appreciated. Thank you. Yeah, you're here. So let's see if we have any more questions or comments. Any?
I'll go
Yes,
first.
ma'am.
So I first have a question for you, Laszlo. Is there within any other division or department of the city, is there something similar to the school's proposed stability? I can't even read my own handwriting.
State Stabilization
Stabilization.
Fund.
Yeah, the line item.
Yeah, there's not, but that's because the schools are unique, right? Their revenue from the state's going to be dependent on one of the factors being our economic growth, whereas for DSS, that's not the case, right? The only one you could argue is CSA, but they haven't updated that methodology since 1997, so that our match is what it's going to be unless they decide to change that methodology for how much we had to pay for CSA, but no one really has that equivalent in terms of determining state revenue. So I always point to Falls Church with how much money they receive from the state for their schools compared to what we receive, and we receive much more because of the realization of our economic strength compared to a city of Falls Church. So that's why I made the recommendation to Dr. Saunders to consider doing something like this, because I want to bet on us being successful here with our economic development, and we need to be prepared for that moment when the state says, okay, Manassas Park, you're moving away from your distressed period, you're now becoming an economically more viable.
A bigger load that you have to carry.
Exactly. So they may reduce that. So this kind of helps us ease that transition if the state decides to take. Now, hopefully they just keep raising more funding for schools overall, so that even if they do reduce the percentage increase, we still get enough to kind of make up for that. But that's the uniqueness of the schools, is that because they're so dependent on state revenues like our DSS, but unlike DSS, their match is based, one of the factors is based on economic development. We have to take that into
So
consideration.
the stronger our economic situation, the more we have to pay for the schools.
Potentially. There's a lot of factors, right? Population,
Yeah, but
total
if we just
population,
boiled it
student
down to-
population. Yeah, but that's a key factor that they do look at. Yeah.
Okay. And then Dr. Saunders, first of all, this is a very, very nice presentation. This is what I'm accustomed to seeing in my day job. So thank you very much, and explained a lot. And I'm going to ask some of the same questions that when we spoke the other day, because I think it's important that the folks at home are hearing it. So one of the questions I think I asked the other day were trends or that you're seeing within the educational field that affects the schools, everything from staffing, because I think there's still a dearth of teachers, right? Yes. And everything from what we're seeing now that students are back in person. Because, I only can imagine what it's like, even as an adult, having to go back in person, which I haven't done yet. I can only imagine what that's going to be like. So I welcome any insight that you have.
Sure, yeah, I mean, certainly staffing is a challenge for us, and we're not unique in that. I think all of the services, whether it's the police department, the fire department, the schools, we are struggling to keep, retain, maintain, hire the staff that we need in order to accomplish our job. So that will continue to be a challenge for us. We actually have a whole team of people out recruiting right now. And so we're going in, I believe the total number I looked the other day was about 33 different colleges across the eastern seaboard, all up and down, trying to recruit staff so that we are well prepared. So that would be one of the things that I would highlight as a continued need that we will have to continue to address. Certainly compensation falls into that, and how competitive we are with those around us when we're at those recruiting fairs. I think the other thing I would identify is really just kind of what I touched on earlier with our students. I'm not sure we know what all the needs are just yet. And I think it will take us a little bit more time to really identify what those academic, social, emotional kinds of needs are for our children that are with us each and every day. We're starting to see some of those things. You know, when we came back in person, we were all very excited to see each other. We were all very excited to be back in person. But we also understood that there was a lot that happened in those 18 months. And so we have children that deal with grief. There was a lot of loss in lots of different ways during that time. And so spending most of our time this year really taking care of the child and understanding where they are, whether they're the little ones or the big ones. They're still all of our children. And so that's something that I think is going to continue as we move down the line, and we won't know. I think we don't know what we don't know at this point, and that's going to be a challenge for us as we try to look at resources and supports and how do we teach differently, how do we make those gains and those gaps in learning, and so I think that's going to take some time.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question. So I noticed that that AP student enrollment has increased over the years. Are we going to do anything in terms of, is there going to be a class size issue with that? Or, because I looked at the hiring and I didn't see any AP teachers. Or how does that work with the increased enrollment of AP students?
So twofold. So we will look to different ways to diversify the opportunities for our students at that secondary level, at that high school level, looking at things like dual enrollment options with our community college, as well as other opportunities through George Mason or what have you. So AP being one piece, dual enrollment and other collaborative opportunities being another opportunity for our students. AP teachers and and dual enrollment, actually AP teachers need different kinds of training. They don't necessarily need a different degree in order to support the AP curriculum. They have to have College Board training and some different kinds of things through College Board. And so that can be given to any teacher who has that content area. We can give that. Whereas like a dual enrollment teacher actually has to have certain kinds of credentials to be a dual enrollment teacher with the college. And so that may require different degrees and such. So it's a little easier to increase the number of sections that we might have in AP in that respect, because we can provide training and professional development to the teachers who provide that particular course. We also have multiple online opportunities, virtual opportunities where students are engaging in an online platform, whether it's Virtual Virginia, whether it's Apex. We have several different tools that we now, good out of the pandemic, we learned. There are different ways in which kids can access that curriculum, and so there's opportunities if we don't have a teacher or we don't have enough spaces or enough of something, then we have some virtual opportunities that we can access as well.
Okay. And my last question is in regards to the 5-year plan. When looking at the medical trust expenses, are we assuming, because at the city, we experienced an increase in our health care costs. So are we assuming that there's not going to be any increased expenses for the schools as well? I mean, we still use Kaiser, right?
Yes, so kind of two layers to that question. Right now, our health costs are not increasing for our Anthem plan.
Anthem,
Our Kaiser
okay.
plan is increasing next year.
Oh.
And that doesn't mean it'll stay like that forever. The medical trust doesn't cost us anything. We get a subsidy from the state, and then the retiree covers that difference. And I just used pretty much a flat projection on that because we can't project or anticipate which retiree will want to participate. Depends on their age and everything. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Yeah, that's all.
I have a question. I don't. How is the budget for extracurricular activities, I guess, projected, or how is it determined, especially in the high school level?
So that would come from the building level principal. So the building principal in the department would identify the student athletics activities kind of budget and work from there. And then I'll let David answer any other additional pieces.
You're hitting the nail on the head. Our phase one process came for the budget. And the director of activities, Mr. Forgas, and the principal, Mr. Force, put those requests in that budget, those line items for extracurricular activities. They also have their student activity funds that support costs for those activities.
Okay,
But
thank you.
they did include them in their requests.
Okay, thank you.
You had mentioned you're recruiting teachers all over the East Coast now. Can you give some examples of where you're going?
So we've had groups in Ohio, we've had groups in North Carolina. I have one group in North Carolina right now. We're visiting HBCUs, we're visiting New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, we were at George Mason, you name it. I think we're hitting most of the opportunities that we can. Still having a lot of virtual career fairs, which it's a little difficult. It's not as successful sometimes. The students coming today, I think, need something different. I was watching. I was on the George Mason SciTech Advisory Board meeting just the other day. They have a gentleman from Walmart, and he said that their best recruiting tool is TikTok. And so, which is interesting,
Scary,
right?
huh?
It's a different, I don't think I'm getting on TikTok to do that. But it is different to try to engage, 21, 22-year-old students, graduates to come and join the career of teaching and education. And so, but we have them throughout colleges all over those areas, in both virtual and in person.
Great, thank you.
Comments or questions?
Sure.
Yes, Councilman.
I just want to thank you, Dr. Saunders, for the excellent presentation, you and Chair Kirkland for the excellent presentation. I also just want to kudos for extending the contract for the counselors, the student liaisons, and the registrar to 11 months. Counselors are so vital in the schools, as you know, and the fact that we're going to be able to extend those hours to our students is just fantastic. And so that really resonated with me in the budget. And just again, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, our counselors are incredibly important and doing very, very good, hard work these days, and really stretching themselves, and we're really appreciative about them.
Follow up? Do you have a question?
Dr. Lyons, can you give me an example of what an unobligated fund would be?
It would be the $514,000 that.
Yeah, I know the amount. I was saying, like, I guess for this year, what was not spent towards that?
Well, we looked, it's a needs-based budget process.
Right.
We went zero-based. Every line item was zeroed out by the budget holder. And then they had to identify their needs, identify their resources and strategies or curriculums, whatever it was, in those line items. And then in phase two of the budget, we looked at it from a central office. And again, we looked at needs, priorities, and everything. So right now, we have identified what we feel are the needs and what we need to address those needs in the budget as it's proposed. So that left a positive difference at the end. And so, I guess that's how we got to that unobligated amount, which may be a one-time thing.
Right.
But that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, but nothing was cut from any department or any of the schools?
No,
And,
actually. That's a great question. So this was a shock to our principals because I told them in the very beginning, phase one, put your request in phase two, we'll look at it
Yeah.
and we'll make some adjustments. So they were, and I made it very transparent. So as we went through each phase, the principal could log into our financial keystone system, pull a report and see how their amounts, if they changed through the phases. And one of the principals said to me, he says, nothing's changed. Is that for real? Yeah, it's for real. I did change one line item on them for them a little bit because they were asking for some staff support funds for recognition and things, and so I had to make that more equitable across the division. So I did change one line item, but what the rest of it, what they asked for, they got.
okay.
And you know, again, timing was good. The extra funds in the projection from the state that helped offset that.
Right.
So they got everything they asked for basically.
All right, good, yeah. Sorry, follow up.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I'll just follow up with, I think enough is never enough in school.
Right.
So I'm just going to say that because we could always use 10 more teachers.
Right.
We could always use 10 more administrators. We could always use another hand here and another hand here, 5 more cafeteria people, another 10 buses, and another set of things. So, I think it is really a process and understanding that we do need to identify our specific needs and know that we want more. And more could always, make a difference as well. And so I think that's important to say as well. We had lots and lots of conversations about what kinds of supports could help at the division level. We've talked about that organizational structure. We're going through some survey opportunities right now of our human resources department. How do we better serve our employees and provide them with the things that they need?
Right.
And that may need staff, and that may need, those types of things. So I think there's always room for more. I don't want to say that there weren't those conversations that were happening, but I feel very confident in keeping our class sizes at a reasonable level, keeping our staff in place, and rewarding their hard work through a competitive salary. And that was really the generating, the thing that kind of generated everything.
Good, excellent. What is the classroom sizes requirement? Is it 25 to 1?
So at the K-3, we do have a 22 to 1 requirement because
Yeah.
we receive funds for K-3 for early reading initiative. And then each of the other levels have a 20, you can go up.
Yeah.
As high as you want.
I see.
Really, high school secondary English classrooms are 25, 26 to 1, so there are some specifics around those in our SOQs. But you do have some flexibility because a lot of those roll up to the division level, so you take the total number of teachers by the number of kids, and those numbers look very different. So I feel good about the K-3 class size as well as the 4th and 5th grade.
Right. Yeah, I see we're I think almost at the top level right now.
The
But with
22
the,
to 1.
right, 22 to 1, even the
Yeah.
24, and with the new development coming on board, I mean, you could be seeing additional teachers in the next couple years.
Correct.
Right?
If the enrollment continues to increase, we will have to adjust.
Right.
We never know what kindergarten's going to look like.
Yeah.
We project what it was this year into next year. I think the pandemic created all kinds of unique patterns in our enrollment and engagement at that level. And so, we may come in with 45 more kindergartners and have to figure out where to put them.
Right.
And then also, how to staff that appropriately and make sure that's it. But we keep a pretty close eye. We just started kindergarten registration. And so we keep a close eye on who's registering, how many do we have in. Ms. Tickle and Ms. Craighill do a wonderful job of counting them all up and starting to place them in the appropriate places.
All right, very good. And then I guess I'm going to touch a little bit on the state stabilization fund. Would that have to come to a vote? Like if you guys are requesting funds from that line item, would the body have to vote? Okay.
Yeah,
I
because
would project that to be an amendment, one of our budget amendments.
yeah, that's always the best way to do it, is
Yeah.
if they need it during the fiscal year, they would come back
As
with a
an
budget
amendment.
amendment and appropriations adjustment, but it's your reserve fund, right?
Right.
And so, or they can do it as part of, if they need an FY '24, when they come back, they can build that request within the budget, as I would do with any contributions from reserves as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, legally, then the body can vote it down, right?
Discretion, yeah.
And the other question was, I guess it might be for Laszlo, the budget for the school, it seems like, are these numbers accurate, increased by only 300,000 each year?
Well, no, that was between FY '22 and '23. That was in last year's model. I will say you will, in my proposed budget next week, not to kind of speak early, you will
Right.
see an increased amount from what you showed in the next 5 years, because I am, again, I want to, everything's about preparing for worst case.
Right.
And so you'll see more funding for schools, especially as we get closer to FY '27. There will be increases.
Oh, okay.
Because I do believe 25, 26, 27, we should start seeing some returns on our investments in terms of economic development. So I'd rather us be safe than sorry and be able to adjust to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, I think that's it for me.
Follow-up?
No follow-up, yeah.
I think it's a testament to your budgeting skills that the stabilization line item is being taken from the 13 million, which was the city's number for the schools. So congratulations. Any other questions or comments?
Well,
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Saunders.
Very
We
good.
appreciate it. Thank you.
I mean, I have a minute.
On to 9C, fourth quarter appropriation for city and schools.
Members of the governing body, I have no anything to add to this line item. This is appropriating remaining funds for both the city and the schools based off the last amended budget that you all adopted back in January.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Okay, it's pretty self-explanatory. There are two motions. The first one is that the governing body appropriate $25,271,619 to the city, including $257,397 for Bull Run ASAP for fourth quarter of fiscal year 2022.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Second motion is that the governing body appropriates $16,929,917 to city schools for fourth quarter of fiscal year 2022.
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you. City manager report?
Nothing to report tonight.
Okay. We do have a closed session. City attorney, do you want to read us into closed session?
I will, but I just want to point out, I forgot, we also need to talk about both acquisition and disposition of real estate. So that's going to be one of them that's in here. Okay, I recommend the governing body go into closed meeting to discuss and consider the acquisition of real property for a public purpose and the disposition of publicly held real property, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position and negotiating strategy of the city, to discuss a prospective business where no previous announcement has been made of the business's interest in locating in the city, to consult with and receive a briefing from legal counsel regarding the status of litigation against the city filed by Reagan Miller, a former city police officer, where such consultation and briefing in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the city, and to consult with the city attorney about negotiations with MP Cinema Realty LLC to potentially amend the purchase and sale agreement for approximately 1.60854 acres of the current city hall pursuant to paragraphs 3, 5, 7, and 8, respectively, of subsection 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. We'll go into closed session. Do we need a 5-minute break, folks?
Yes.
Or- Okay, 5 minutes.